Oh, hey guys, sorry, I didn't see you walk in. Well, obviously, I'm not in school today. So I just wanted to update you guys with what you need to do today. Uh, First off, let's get started. Number one, if you guys can have your cameras on, that would be greatly appreciated. We'll go with our normal routine. Thank you, Janice, for having your camera on as always. Eric, thank you as well. I see Chung, Chung debating right now. Should I turn my camera on or keep it off? No worries, totally cool. But yeah, anyways, this lecture is geared specifically towards period two today, May 4th, on a Tuesday, because, like I said, I'm not in attendance. But let's get started, guys, because there's a lot of things that I do want to cover today. Number one, let's take a look at our pacing guide. Let's take a look at our pacing guide. Here it is. So there's a couple changes that I made to this pacing guide. And guys, remember that everything for the remainder of the year is going to be on this pacing guide. What you should be reviewing, what you should be studying, AP test date. So just make sure, tutoring dates. So make sure that you are always updating and checking this document. It's a live document. Reminder that there is tutoring tomorrow, right? Every Wednesday and Friday there's tutoring from 2:45 to 4:30. Unfortunately for tomorrow, I do have to start tutoring a little bit later because I have a meeting at right after school at 2:30 till it goes roughly till about 3:15 or so. So with that being said, tutoring tomorrow, Wednesday, May 5th, will begin at 3:30 and we'll go till 4:30. If you need me to stay longer, I don't mind. I'll go beyond that time. We are going to go over periods one and two. Anyways, we're finished with content. Today will actually be the last lecture on content because we did fall that one day behind because we had that one asynchronous day last week when we transitioned to hybrid. But what I've done for you guys is this, if you're taking that May 6th exam, do me a favor, please email me so I can let Ms. McKee know, right? She already has an idea. I gave her an idea of who maybe to expect. But obviously you want to make sure that you're COVID tested and you have your daily pass so you can come in and take that test, right? So just email me, let me know, all right? So looking at this, guys, if you are taking, I think the majority of you guys are taking that May 19 digital exam. A couple things that you want to pay attention to. This week, right, we're going to be working on period 6, 7, 8, and 9, right? We're going to be focusing more specifically on the document-based question, building those skills up to make sure that you have a good understanding of what the expectations are for that rubric, and you're phrasing your responses that's explicit to me, the AP reader, very direct, right? What you also want to be doing, though, is I've kind of put the schedule here for you guys. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week, you want to go ahead and review period 7, 8, and 9. Period 7, 8, and 9. Review this, all right? And what I mean by review is go on AP Classroom. All of you guys are on AP Classroom, right? And do the progress checks. Here you have multiple choice questions. I'll go ahead and unlock all the DBQs as well as SAQs so you get that practice. And if you want me to grade it, just shoot me an email. Meet during my office hours. Every day I have office hours from 2:30 to 3:30. But yeah, you want to make sure that you're doing these progress checks on AP Classroom. All the multiple choice, they're unlocked. It's good practice for you. Other things that you want to do, look back at your notes, look back at all your viewing guide or reading, your guided reading questions. All those things are going to help you, okay? But that is the schedule that we have here. Thursday, Friday, I would say do periods 5 and 6, right? And over the weekend. Then next week, week of 10, we're going to work a little bit more on the short answer question, as well as the DBQ again, periods 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I would do for 3 to 4 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, do periods 1 to 2, right? So getting as much practice. When we are in class, I am not going to go over much content unless you need me to, or I'll put you guys in a different breakout rooms. There's going to be, so that way, if you wanted to do a time DBQ, hey, I'm going to throw you right at it. You'll do it. And I'll try my best to grade it as quickly as possible and give you some direct feedback that next class, right? But if you did want me to cover content, I'll have a smaller breakout room to go over some of those key concepts. But that's the reason why we do have those after school sessions.
If you do have any questions about the AP review, just make sure that you email me, let me know. Email me, let me know. I will be by my computer, hopefully for most of the day today, but I don't know what time I'll be back. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. If you click on your materials, I want you to open up that last folder that we have there, looking at Lyndon B. Johnson, Reagan, and Vietnam War. So here it is. And I want you to open up this right here, PowerPoint that says Vietnam. And this is the last thing we covered. We went over Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. Our goal is, right, we have two goals for today. The first goal is explain the cause and effects of continuing policy debates about the role of the federal government over time. So our goal today is you should be able to compare and contrast Lyndon B. Johnson's policies to Nixon as well as the Reagan. How did they approach the federal government and the role of the federal government in the lives of everyday Americans, right? So just be able to do that. Here, guys, you see a sample SAQ, right? If you want to do the sample SAQ, you could email me the answers and I'll get back to you, let you know if you are correct, right? Remember, it should take you only 12 minutes to do this whole short answer question, right? So roughly about 4 minutes for number 1, 4 minutes for number 2, 4 minutes for number 3. So let's get started here. Our secondary goal is explain the cause and effects of the Vietnam War. All right, so I'm just gonna go through this video and I'll stop it periodically just to discuss some of these terms. If I go too quickly, feel free to pause the video. So me and Mr. Himmler are going to co-teach this. Take it away, Stevie.
Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimlich's History. Now, we've been going through Unit 8 of the AP U.S. History curriculum and talking all about the U.S. involvement in the Cold War, both in its domestic and international implications. And in this video, we're going to keep a ride on going with that by talking about the Vietnam War. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked Tonkin resolution style, then let's get to it. Now, I'm a simple man, and this is a simple video. All we're trying to do is explain the causes and effects of the Vietnam War. Now, in the last video, I left off talking about U.S. involvement in Vietnam by introducing its geographic reality, namely that it was divided into North and South after being decolonized. And I also talked about its political reality, namely that the North was communist under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh and the South was democratic with strong ties to the United States. Additionally, recall Eisenhower's domino theory, which said that U.S. support of South Vietnam was critical because if it fell to the communists, then it would be like a domino knocking over the rest of the nation's.
Okay. So I want to start going over some of these terms that are very, very, very important. All right. So let's get started here. The first term that we need to know is a geographic reality. So the cause and effects of the Vietnam War, you need to know the context. I don't know if you all can see the chat or not in this recording, but one of the things that I am going to type here is you need to understand that Vietnam was once Indochina, and Indochina was colonized by the French. Colonized by the French. So even nowadays, no joke with you, so I'll go to some of my favorite Vietnamese restaurant, I'll get some pho, and sometimes they'll throw in like, hey, this French element of it, right? And you know, some people like it, some people don't, but this goes back to, of course, that cultural diffusion of French colonization, right? I mean, I have some Vietnamese family back in Chicago, and I love the authenticity of Vietnamese food. Right. But in short, what you want to understand here that you're getting is what this geographic reality is that after World War II, Indochina was in the process of being decolonized, right? The French tried their hardest to maintain control. The United States actually provided resources to the French to help quell any rebellion, right? They wanted the French to stay in power. Well, that didn't happen. It didn't happen, right? So as a result of that, the geographic reality is you are going to get Vietnam be split. We're going to get North and South Vietnam. North and South Vietnam. That's a geographic reality of it. And the political reality is the United States is, of course, concerned about containment. They're concerned about not spreading communism, right? We've talked about this all the way since the 1920s. So we're getting this continuity here.
So the political reality is South Vietnam is going to be democratic, and then North Vietnam is going to be communist. Now, Mr. Himmler did mention the name of Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is very important, right? Specifically because he is the leader of the Viet Cong, or also North Vietnam, which is the communist state. Now, what you want to understand here, giving you some context, I think your book might have talked about this. If not, I'm giving you another perspective. Is Ho Chi Minh actually, he actually tried his best to, he went to the United States, and he looked to the United States to kind of help have Vietnam gain its independence. You know, he reached out, I believe, to Woodrow Wilson as well as FDR. But of course, during the Truman administration, the goal was containment. So to give Vietnam its sovereignty and independence was a threat to the United States, because they wanted to make sure that containment was stopped, or communism was stopped, right? Hence the support for French colonization. So the French are out, you get North, South Vietnam, and now the United States is concerned about the spread of communism. And this is what we call the domino theory, the domino theory. I believe this term was coined by President Eisenhower, and his belief was that if one Asian nation would fall to communism, this is going to cause a domino effect where other nations are going to result to communism as well. So with that being said, the presidents afterwards are very concerned about this domino theory and want to do everything possible within the Asian sphere to control communism. So that's what we mean by domino theory. Think about like dominoes. I don't know if you all play dominoes, but when I was little, you know, me and my cousins, we'd play this. You'd stack up with these dominoes, hit them one by one, and hopefully they would all fall. I was never good at it, which is why I'm a history teacher and not math, which I don't even know if math has anything to do with it. But anyways, let's continue here.
Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimlich History.
Oh my gosh, it always
happens.
happens.
Unit 8 of the AP U.S. History curriculum and talking domino, knocking over the rest of the nations in the region, which would soon be a giant communist bloc party in the Pacific. And remember, U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War was largely devoted to the containment of communism. So Eisenhower left office and John F. Kennedy came in to replace him, and he agreed with the communist domino theory. Therefore, Kennedy sent no small amount of what he called military advisors into South Vietnam. And Kennedy claimed that they weren't there to fight, they were just there to support the Southern government. Ugh, we hate the Northern communists. So glad you sent 16,000 people over here to help us fight them off. Oh, no. We're not here to fight. We're here to support. So, tell me, how does the Northern Vietnamese aggression make you feel? What? Anyway, you can see where this is going. In 1963, Kennedy went ahead and got himself assassinated, and his vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson, becomes president just...
Okay. So obviously I don't know how to work this PowerPoint where I could just stop that video. But one thing you want to understand here, during JFK's administration, he obviously buys into this domino theory. And one of the things that he does is he sends 16,000 military advisors. Obviously, these military advisors are intervening within this conflict, right? I mean, think about this. America wants to contain communism. That is it. So what you want to pay attention to here, though, is how Lyndon B. Johnson takes this a step further.
But that didn't matter because Johnson used this incident as a justification for the battleship in the Gulf of bad in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The story goes, I should make you feel. What? Anyway, you can see where this is going. In 1963, Kennedy went ahead and got himself assassinated, and his vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson, becomes president just as the situation in Vietnam was degenerating. And that is when things got bad in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The story goes like this. The North Vietnamese fired on a U.S. battleship in the Gulf of Tonkin, which, remember, was only there to get a sense of how the Vietnamese were feeling. Why else would you have a battleship in the Gulf of Tonkin? But even that aggression is disputed. We're not sure whether the North Vietnamese actually fired upon the U.S. ship. But that didn't matter because Johnson used this incident as a justification for U.S. military involvement in the region. And to that end, Johnson asked Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which essentially gave the president a blank check to exercise whatever powers were necessary to protect American interests in the region. Now, to be clear, this was not a declaration of war because only Congress can declare war. This was just authority given to the commander-in-chief of the military to do what needed to be done to defend American interests in the region. But it did lead to some military engagements, and that fact led to a huge debate back in America. Like, had the executive branch abused its power by conducting foreign policy with military action apart from congressional approval? And the answer to that is yes, that's what happened, but also kind of no, because Congress did give approval for the military intervention, so yeah, it's complicated. The point is, with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution in play, the U.S. military got heavily involved in the region. Now, the real problem is how long it would take to deploy enough military personnel from the United States to make a difference over there. Nope, good thing we already had 16,000 military advisors over there. Okay, I think I'm ready to talk about my feelings now. Man, stuff your feelings. It's time for some pew-pew. Well, by 1963, the North Vietnamese had sent 40,000 soldiers to fight in South Vietnam, and baby, now it was on. Now, Johnson's strategy was step-by-step escalation. The idea was that the North Vietnamese were backwards and primitive, and if the mighty United States just applied a little more pressure, then they would bring them to their knees. Well, a little pressure didn't work, so let's just crank that knob again. Still didn't work? Let's crank it a little more. Still didn't work? Let's crank it a little more. Then all of a sudden, by 1965, nearly 200,000 American troops were fighting in Vietnam, and 2 years later, it was more than double that number. And this North Vietnamese enemy turned out to be far more adept at fighting than the Americans had predicted, and so American troops were dying by the thousands for a cause that seemed at best vague to them. I mean, in World War II, the enemy was clear. It was like fascism, totalitarianism. In Vietnam, we're sending our sons into the meat grinder year after year so that we can stop the spread of communism, and all in a war that was never officially declared by Well, hey there, and welcome back.
Okay, so a couple things. Number one, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, you want to make sure you understand this. And the reason why this incident is so important is because it's going to lead to the resolution, which is going to lead to step-by-step escalation. Well, Mr. Burr, but you're going really quickly, so I'm going to slow things down. The Gulf of Tonkin, what ends up happening here is you're having you're just getting aggression. You're getting aggression by the Viet Cong, which is the northern Vietnamese troops, against the American military. Because remember, we had those military advisors that were there. Well, what the Gulf of Tonkin resolution is, it's basically a blank check given by Congress to Lyndon B. Johnson to basically do whatever he needs to do to ensure that communism doesn't spread, to ensure that the Vietnam conflict ends, right? So think about this. That's like me saying, hey, who am I going to give some money to? Let's me saying, hey, let's say Josue, here's my credit card. I want you to go ahead and take care of lunch for everybody, right? The thing is, it's a blank check. It's a blank statement. So meaning that you could do whatever you want. If you wanted to go buy everyone pizza, go for us way. If you wanted to do In-N-Out, whatever. And what's happening here with the Gulf of Tonkin incident is Congress is basically telling, or Gulf of Tonkin resolution is Congress is basically telling Lyndon B. Johnson, here's a blank check. Do whatever you want with all this money. You have unlimited funds to do so, right? And put this into context, guys, right? There's a couple ways that you could take a look at this perspective. Lyndon B. Johnson is also spending on the Great Society during this time, right? So critics would argue money that's being allocated to the Vietnam War could be used to the Great Society, right? Other critics would argue, hey, he's also spending an enormous amount, right? But his strategy is step-by-step escalation. And I want you to think about this. Step-by-step escalation is one step at a time, right? You're doing this gradually. What he's gradually doing is escalating the amount of troops that are being sent to Vietnam. He's escalating the amount of troops that are being sent to Vietnam. He already had 16,000 troops to begin with, right? But now when we're looking at this, this is getting into, close to the hundreds of thousands. And where the criticism comes, which I know your textbook, I believe, brings up, and if they don't, I'm going to let you know right now, is there's a lot of criticism that in the front lines are soldiers that are of color. You're looking at African-American soldiers, right? You're looking at Chicano soldiers. You're looking at Asian-American soldiers. And this criticism comes all at the same time we're getting the civil rights movement that's going on in the United States, right? So let's continue here. Next things, we have credibility gap and television.
heavily involved in the region. Now, the real problem is how long it would take to deploy enough military personnel from the United States to make a difference over there. Nope, good thing we already had 16,000 military advisors over there. Okay, I think I'm ready to talk about my feelings now. Man, stuff your feelings. It's time for some pew-pew. Well, by 1963, the North Vietnamese had sent 40,000 soldiers to fight in South Vietnam, and baby, now it was on. Now, Johnson's strategy was step-by-step escalation. The idea was that the North Vietnamese were backwards and primitive, and if the mighty United States just applied a little more pressure, then they would bring them to their knees. Well, a little pressure didn't work, so let's just crank that knob again. Still didn't work? Let's crank it a little more. Still didn't work? Let's crank it a little more. Then all of a sudden, by 1965, nearly 200,000 American troops were fighting in Vietnam, and 2 years later, it was more than double that number. And this North Vietnamese enemy turned out to be far more adept at fighting than the Americans had predicted, and so American troops were dying by the thousands for a cause that seemed at best vague to them. I mean, in World War II, the enemy was clear. It was like fascism, totalitarianism. In Vietnam, we're sending our sons into the meat grinder year after year so that we can stop the spread of communism, and all in a war that was never officially declared by Congress. So as you can imagine, the Vietnam War was fiercely opposed and debated back home. As Americans continued to die, the nation at home seemed to be coming apart at the seams. Not only was the civil rights movement in full force, but intense anti-war protests were also erupting. And part of this was due to the Johnson administration's campaigns of disinformation on the war. Johnson never stopped believing that just a little more escalation would win the war, and so to keep Americans from opposing it, the Johnson administration painted a very rosy picture of what was happening across the sea. But the problem was that this war became America's first truly televised war, and now that the television was a staple of most American households, reporters in the field of battle in Vietnam sent back reels of the actual situation on the ground, which was that it was a bloodbath that America was certainly not winning and may have even been losing. And so with these two different versions of reality flooding the consciousness of the average American, a new term is coined: credibility gap. The president is lying to us about the progress of the war, and we can see it for ourselves right here on television. Anyway, the event that broke Johnson's ability to continue the escalation was the Tet Offensive. This was a massive surprise attack carried out by the North Vietnamese, which inflicted heavy casualties on U.S. troops. However, the U.S. did counterattack and inflicted even heavier losses on the Viet Cong. And in response to this, Johnson and his staff requested 200,000 more troops be sent to Vietnam, and it was at this that Johnson's advisors turned against him and said, no, you cannot do that. And so Johnson ended the escalation there. And after Johnson's term was over, Richard Nixon was elected president, and his goal was to reduce U.S. involvement in Vietnam without looking like we had conceded defeat. And the chief program he proposed was known as Vietnamization. The program basically provided for the removal of American troops from Vietnam while still lending financial aid and munitions to carry out the war for themselves. And it was Nixon who effectively ended the Vietnam War. Okay, if you need more help on Unit 8, then here's the playlist right here. And if you
So a couple things I want to go over. Number one, we talked about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution and the debate that comes with it. And what I mean by this is, remember that Congress is writing a blank check to Lyndon B. Johnson, right, to send troops. Now, here's the thing. There's controversy here because Congress is also needed in order to declare war. So there are some members of Congress saying what Lyndon B. Johnson has done, where he's using these troops, is unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional because Congress did not officially declare war. That what he's doing, it's an abuse of executive power, abuse of presidential powers. However, Lyndon B. Johnson is saying, wait a minute, you wrote me this blank check to use these troops, right? So therefore, you even though you didn't declare war, you've told me that I could escalate the amount of troops that I have. So there's a lot of debate on whether or not this conflict was constitutional. Well, what ends up happening here is Lyndon B. Johnson starts to lose a lot of his credibility, right? And here's the reason why. He's given his presidential addresses, to the American people, saying that the conflict in Vietnam, it's stable, that it's controlled, that the troops will be back home in no time. However, the media, at this time, television is becoming more prominent. Journalism with the use of television is used to document Vietnam. And Americans start to see these images of what's going on. You're getting soldiers sending letters home discussing about the horrors that they see. So Lyndon B. Johnson starts to lose his credibility as a result of this, right? And the final straw is at the Tet Offensive, which is once again a Northern Vietnamese attack on U.S. troops, where Lyndon B. Johnson wants to even send more troops in order to deal with that attack. And finally, his advisors are like, no, we can't. We've already escalated it close to 500,000 troops, starting from 16,000 at the JFK administration, to more than 250,000. So finally they said, no, this is unconstitutional, or you're questioning even whether it's constitutional. And Lyndon B. Johnson is out. He loses. You want to understand during this time, I want you to put this in context. You're getting the civil rights movement that's going on. You're getting all the gay liberation movement, the feminist movement. So you're getting a lot of protests that are going on. With that being said, Vietnam is widely protested all throughout the United States. And you see this clash of culture that's going on with those that support the war as well as those that don't, right? Richard Nixon does end up coming to power, and he runs under the platform of Vietnamization. And Vietnamization basically means that he wants to draw American troops, right? However, he wants to train the Southern Vietnamese to be able to defend themselves against North Vietnam, also known as the Viet Cong, okay? So that's pretty much the Vietnam War in a nutshell. There's so much more than this that, hey, in any normal year, guys, actually, you know what? I have most of you for IB, where we will go over the immigration policies that were going on during this time, because it's important. It's important to understand that many people are going to flee Vietnam as well as Cambodia due to the things that are going on with this conflict. But I do want to continue. So I want you to listen to the song. And a good practice is I want you to give me the background, contextualize it, but as well as give me the purpose. Here we go.
Soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming. Fort Dead in Ohio. Fort Dead in Ohio. Fort Dead in Ohio. Fort Dead in Ohio.
This is a good time if you wanted to pause it, contextualize, as well as give me the purpose of the song. I'll give you 5 seconds, right? If not, I'm going to go over it. So contextualizing it, actually it's less than 5, but hey, contextualizing it. If you would mention anything about Lyndon B. Johnson's escalation of troops during Vietnam, right? That would definitely work. If you want to bring up that there were anti-war, protests that were going on, you're seeing a lot of signs that are saying this is a rich man's war, right? I mean, one of the things we want to understand is any money that's being put towards the war is, of course, limiting the war on poverty, the Great Society that Lyndon B. Johnson had put together, right? And then you also start to see the criticism of Nixon that comes. Although Nixon did have his process of Vietnamization, we also want to understand, which we'll look in this next video, is that he actually called, and this is another thing you could put for context, is this would be the Kent State protests, in which you're getting 4 college students that were shot by the National Guard that was sent by Nixon, right, to stop these protests that were going on. That Nixon, he runs under the platform of law and order, and he actually calls these protesters bums, right? So those are some of the things. The purpose of this song is to raise awareness, right, of what's going on, not only in the home front with these protests, but also hopefully to convince and push individuals to advocate for bringing the troops home during the later stages of the Vietnam War. So you're probably wondering, well, Mr. Burwell, what about Lyndon B. Johnson? What about Nixon? Let's take a look at now the Nixon video that we have here. So if you go over here, you'll notice the Nixon video. And what you need to do is you want to make sure that you watch this video. And you know what? We'll watch it together. And just to understand
this oceanside verbal
of Nixon's policies
is about to become the backdrop for an unforgettable vacation memory. One of the rare moments when kids just let themselves be.
All right, here we go.
The United States of America is often said to be one of the most powerful positions in the world. But of all the U.S. presidents accused of misusing that power, only one has left office as a result. Does Richard Nixon deserve to be remembered for more than the scandal that ended his presidency? Find out as we put this disgraced president's legacy on trial in History versus Richard Nixon.
Order, order. Now, who's the defendant today? Some kind of crook?
Ahem. No, Your Honor. This is Richard Milhouse Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, who served from 1969 to 1974.
Hold on. That's a weird number of years for a president to serve.
Well, you see, President Nixon resigned for the good of the nation and was pardoned by President Ford, who took over after him. He resigned because he was about to be impeached, and he didn't want the full extent of his crimes exposed.
And what were these crimes?
Your Honor, the Watergate scandal was one of the grossest abuses of presidential power in history. Nixon's men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters to wiretap the offices and dig up dirt on opponents for the re-election campaign.
It was established that the president did not order this burglary.
But as soon as he learned of it, he did everything to cover it up, while lying about it for months.
Yes, but it was for the good of the country.
He did so much during his time in office and could have done so much more without a scandal jeopardizing his accomplishments.
Accomplishments?
Yes, Your Honor. Did you know it was President Nixon who proposed the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and signed the National Environmental Policy Act into law? Not to mention the Endangered Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, expansion of the Clean Air Act.
Sounds pretty progressive of him.
Progressive? Hardly. Nixon's presidential campaign courted Southern voters through fear and resentment of the civil rights movement. Speaking of civil rights, the prosecution may be surprised to learn that he signed the Title IX Amendment, banning gender-based discrimination in education, and ensured that desegregation of schools occurred peacefully. And he lowered the voting age to 18 so that students could vote. He didn't have much concern for students after 4 were shot by the National Guard at Kent State. Instead, he called them bums for protesting the Vietnam War, a war he had campaigned on ending. But he did end it. He ended it 2 years after taking office. Meanwhile, his campaign had sabotaged the previous president's peace talks, urging the South Vietnamese government to hold out for supposedly better terms, which, I might add, didn't materialize. So he protracted the war for 4 years, in which 20,000 more U.S. troops and over 1 million more Vietnamese died for nothing.
A presidential candidate interfering in foreign negotiations? Isn't that treason?
It is, Your Honor, a clear violation of the Logan Act of 1799. I think we're forgetting President Nixon's many foreign policy achievements. It was he who normalized ties with China, forging economic ties that continue today. Are we so sure that's a good thing? And don't forget his support of the coup in Chile that replaced the democratically elected President Allende with a brutal military dictator. It was part of the fight against communism. Weren't tyranny and violence the reasons we opposed communism to begin with? Or was it just fear of the lower class rising up against the rich? President Nixon couldn't have predicted the violence of Pinochet's regime. And being anti-communist didn't mean neglecting the poor. He proposed a guaranteed basic income for all American families, still a radical concept today. And he even pushed for comprehensive health care reform, just the kind that passed 40 years later.
I'm still confused about this burglary business. Was he a crook or not?
Your Honor, President Nixon...
I'm going to stop it there. Big picture, what you need to be able to do is understand the pros and cons of Nixon's administration, but also how he's different from other presidents, right? His role in the federal government. A couple things. Federal government, he's different from Lyndon B. Johnson through Vietnamization. He's withdrawing troops and ensuring that the South Vietnamese are well-trained and self-sufficient. Big difference, right? However, one thing you do understand is that he does make government a little, he does instill the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So that's one way that he does expand government's role, is ensuring that, the Clean Air Act is passed, right? However, he is a president of law and order, right? Remember, he's a Republican. He's running under the stance that the civil rights movement and a lot of demonstrations that are going on are a threat to society, so therefore law and order should be passed, right? So those are some of the, or law and order should be used, right? But the main thing you want to understand about Lincoln and why he's highly criticized by both Democrats and Republicans today is specifically because of his threat to democracy in the Watergate scandal, as well as his campaigning against Lyndon B. Johnson. So you could use that as academic vocabulary, Watergate scandal, as well as campaigning against Lyndon B. Johnson. With the Watergate, we'll start out with campaigning against Lyndon B. Johnson. He actually negotiates with the Southern Vietnamese government and letting them know that they should not make a deal with Lyndon B. Johnson, and that if they hold out till after the election, Nixon would be able to work out a better deal, right? This, according to some historians, would end up making the Vietnam War go longer. Secondly, once he is in power, right, and he runs for election, or through the campaigning process, one of the things that he does is he wiretaps, right? He wiretaps the Democratic National Building, right, or the headquarters, right? And the goal is, of course, is to obtain valuable information that might help his campaign against the Democrats. Although Nixon claims that he had nothing to do with it, right? He wasn't necessarily the most cooperative with the investigation. So therefore, he does resign, right? Main thing you want to understand is that although there were some pros, right, that this, in many ways, ends up being what he's known for in regards to his presidency, is the corruption that existed, right? It's similar to, you're looking at Lyndon B. Johnson. Democrats would argue that, hey, the Great Society did wonders, right? That it definitely helped alleviate poverty. However, he's known more for he's criticized for his policies on Vietnam. So know the difference between the both. So last
Nixon may have violated a law,
and I'm not going to record a video on this.
But what was the
you want to make sure that you understand the Reagan administration, right? A couple things. I'm going to have you watch this video on your own, but you got to know is in 1964, we're getting what we call the new right, right? The new right. So you're getting kind of this reformation of the Republican Party. Now, Ronald Reagan is able to win the election, right? Specifically in the 1980s, specifically because of three things: stagflation, energy crisis, and the Iran hostage crisis. So put these into context. Jimmy Carter, so you're getting, after Nixon, you're getting Ford, and then you're getting Democrat Jimmy Carter. Now, the issue with Jimmy Carter is he experiences what we call stagflation. What that means, there's high unemployment, and there's also high inflation. The cost of living becomes very expensive. So he's criticized for his economic policies. In fact, I've talked to a lot of history professors and asking, what were his shortcomings as a president? And that would be it, is you're looking at a lot of these things are tied to the economy. Second thing is the energy crisis, right? Oil and gas prices increased dramatically. And this is because of the formation of OPEC. When you want to think about OPEC, think about this almost as a trust of Middle Eastern oil companies, basically regulating the price of oil and limiting the amount of supplies that are sent to the United States. So this is going to drive oil prices dramatically up. In your book, there are images of people lining up in gas stations because of the shortage of gas. And a lot of this is due to a lot of the conflicts that were going on during the Carter administration. You're looking at the Arab-Israeli conflict, which you should read on. You're looking at the Suez crisis, right? And also the Iranian Revolution. We talked about this in a previous lecture, where, of course, you're getting Ayatollah Khomeini that ends up taking power, and there's still a lot of friction and tension that existed from the coup that existed in the 1950s, where they put the Shah into power. And the Shah, remember, was a modernist. He wanted to westernize Iran. Well, a lot of conservatives in Iran, religious conservatives, were very angry about this, and when they stormed the U.S. embassy, they took some hostages. And Carter was not able to negotiate, just a way to kind of stop this hostage crisis from doing it. I mean, this goes on for months, but Reagan is able to do so. In fact, it's announced during his inauguration, right? Other things, Reagan's pro-business. So he runs under the platform of, it should say, Cold War conservatism. Sorry. But he runs under the platform of pro-business economically. He wants to cut taxes on business. He feels by cutting taxes on business is going to raise jobs. He's a moral religious conservative, right? He wants to put restrictions on abortion, school prayer. These are main issues that were important. That, remember, we go back to Lyndon B. Johnson, the Earl Warren Court made some decisions that conservatives weren't really happy about. And he's actually, I believe Reagan actually appoints 4 federal judges. But you also want to understand Reaganomics. Reaganomics, also known as trickle-down economics, he believes on taxing the rich, right? I take that back. No. He believes on cutting taxes on the rich, because he believes that by cutting taxes on the rich, that the positive effects of this are going to trickle down to all rungs of the social class ladder. That if you cut the taxes on the rich are going to invest in the economy. Therefore, the middle class and the lower class will have job creation. Well, the issue with this is if you're cutting taxes on the rich, what ends up happening, is that it also ends up cutting, the amount of revenue that the government brings in. And as a result of Reagan cutting those taxes, one of the things he also does is he increases the amount of military spending. So government spending really isn't going down, but you're getting a lot of welfare programs under LBJ that were cut, right? And deregulation, he's limiting the amount of restrictions that he puts on government, on businesses, right? Other things that you want to know, I'd look at the other videos, is you need to know the Iran-Contra conflict and also his policies on affirmative action, which are in the next 2 slides. All right, guys. Well, I hope this is useful. Let me know if you have any questions. But I'll see you all tutoring tomorrow. I'll send you all a message. See ya.